Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared another quick list video for all of you. We're going to be looking at 5 Marvel comic must-read hidden gems. And obviously this is a huge brush to paint with for a recommendation video, so for the sake of this video, I tried to pick more contemporary released books and tried to pick things that were non-omnibus. And while I can't wait to talk about my choices today, before we jump in, I do want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now on with the show. In no particular order, we're going to kick off this list with Dark Ages by Tom Taylor over here at Marvel Comics. This to me was a very fun kind of what if or else worlds kind of story. This is a couple issues long, maybe 5 or 6 issues, and it's kind of can be read as its own standalone graphic novel. I really like that. Because of that, this is so perfect for new readers, although if you have an understanding of the Marvel Universe and its characters, I think there are even bigger payoffs in this story arc. Without giving away too many spoilers at all here, essentially what Dark Ages is it kind of presents a alternate present Marvel universe in which all kind of electronics, technology, lights, even like electronic lights, everything has been wiped out due to kind of a disaster, attack, cataclysmic kind of event. And anyway, we're thrust into these kind of tribal groups as nature has kind of reasserted itself, and we have humanity kind of hanging on in these little groups. We do have some remaining superheroes and villains trying to survive and trying to, in some cases, govern the best they can. What I really like about this is that it puts Tom Taylor back in a fun sandbox. He's known for doing things over at DC Comics like Injustice and Deceased that were kind of in a similar vein, where you have all these popular and well-known characters in just a kind of what-if, Elseworlds kind of make-believe space where they can do just wild stuff that won't affect the continuity at all. And that's essentially what we have here with Dark Ages. This is a total alternate universe to the Marvel Universe, so Tom Taylor is able to have just really big stakes, big conflicts, and big ramifications for a lot of his characters and their actions, and it doesn't affect the main continuity. I really like that because I feel like when Tom Taylor is given a big leash, he can really have some good play, and like I feel with so many of the works I've read from Tom Taylor, from Marvel and DC, I think he just really has an understanding of the voices of these individual characters, where all the characters presented in this work feel authentically these characters. Really, really love that. It absolutely helped with immersion and kind of selling the story for me, because I felt like these were all the actual characters, even if we're in a slightly different version of the Marvel Universe. One of the reasons I wanted to recommend this as a more hidden gem, I think there's a lot of people that already enjoy this title, but I think unlike something like Injustice or Deceased over at DC Comics, Dark Ages really didn't get as many accolades or recognition, and I think it went under the radar for a lot of people out there. I don't think there are any more prestigious editions of this title either. I think it's really single issues, digital, or this trade paperback, but I do think that this is one worth picking up. It's a really fun ride, it's very well paced, doesn't overstay its welcome, and while I would love to read subsequent stories in this universe, if this were to be a one-and-done graphic novel situation, I would be more than pleased with that as well. Don't miss out on Dark Ages. Next on my list is maybe my most controversial pick. This is the sensational Spider-Man Feral. This to me was a fun trade paperback I picked up years ago. I just kind of saw it, read the back, and thought the storyline sounded interesting. And honestly, as I walk away from this story, that's really what I felt. It was interesting. It was fun. I was thoroughly entertained. Is this the best Spider-Man story that's ever been written? No, probably not. Is it a fun ride that I think a lot of people have missed out on? Yeah, this is a great story. If you haven't noticed, Spider-Man is obviously animal-themed, as are many of his allies, supporting characters, and of course his villains. What Feral does is kind of present a storyline where a lot of the animal-based heroes and villains in his universe are affected and are kind of acting maybe more savagely, wildly, and without explanation at first. And Spider-Man has to contend with all of these things, figure out what's going wrong, and as always, stop evildoers and fight for right. We have character appearances like Black Cat, Bat and Vulture and the Lizard, and that's just to name a few. This is a really fun story packed full of a lot of great interactions and some incredible fight and action sequences. For whatever reason, I never hear people talk about this storyline, but I, for one, really enjoyed it. Frankly, there's a reason it's been in my collection all of these years. Now, admittedly, I've never reviewed it on the channel, but if that's something that sounds of interest to you, definitely drop me a comment and I'll see what I can do in the future. As you can see here, we have a lot of great artwork as well. The back of the book even has some art from Clayton Crane, which has a very, very distinct visual style that looks more kind of computer-generated, photorealistic. Anyway, it's a really fun addition to Spider-Man here. But yeah, I think this is a really fun one, Spider-Man Feral. I think ultimately what it really boiled down to is the premise just hooked me. I love the idea of kind of tying together so many of the villains of Spider-Man, the supporting cast, who just happen to all be animal themed, and kind of have them be affected kind of by this well, you'll see in the storyline. I don't want to spoil too much, but I thought it was just a really clever approach to a lot of the already pre-existing Spider-Man universe characters. Thought it was fresh, interesting. It was a fun Spider-Man story that, again, was well-paced. It was quick. This is not a big collection, and for whatever reason, I see so many people pass over it, but this is a fun one. And if you're a fan of our favorite wall crawler, this is definitely one I would recommend to you all. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book list videos like this, unboxings, hauls, comic book reviews. I even dabble with shorts and live stream on occasion when I can. Anyway, thank you for considering. Now on with the show. Next on my list, Daredevil Parts of a Whole by David Mack and Joe Quesada from Marvel Comics. This is during that Marvel Knights era of Daredevil, and it takes place directly after Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil. This is also sandwiched right before the Brian Michael Bendis, Alex Maleev era on Daredevil, and I feel like for whatever reason, this story gets passed over quite a bit. Now, admittedly, this does have a bit more recognition with the advent of that Echo show in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because this storyline, of course, introduces us to the character of Echo. I had the opportunity to actually meet the writer, David Mack, at a local kind of comic event. I actually had him sign the front of this trade paperback, which you probably saw at the opening of this little segment. But really cool guy. He's most prolifically probably a comic book artist. He has this really cool watercolor style that you see kind of strewn about the artwork here in this collection. But the main artist for this book is Joe Quesada, and David Mack is primarily the writer. But the writing is great. It's tight. It's kind of psychological. It's a little romantic. We have a really fun kind of romantic angle between Matt Murdock and Maya Lopez, Echo. Really fun stuff here. This is a really well-paced, well-done Daredevil story. I don't think you necessarily need to read Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil before this. I do think it's absolutely accommodating to newer readers. If you're a fan of the Kingpin as well, he's heavily involved with this storyline, and I think he's used exceptionally here. It's a really wonderful book. This is another one that, for whatever reason, I think it's because David Mack didn't have a long tenure on Daredevil. I know he wrote this. He wrote another one down the line, Vision Quest, which also had Echo. He illustrated a little bit on some of Bendis's early stories, but he didn't have like a long run on Daredevil outside of these couple stories. So you don't often see like the Daredevil by David Mack omnibus or something like that. So I think this collection is really left out of a lot of bigger kind of books or discussion, but honestly, it's a really great story. It introduces a really powerful and interesting character, and it's just one I could recommend highly. I do think that as a Daredevil fan, it's a must read. It's a fun modern run book too that just, again, I don't think a lot of people are talking about outside of the Echo show that came out recently. That was actually my impetus to revisiting this book, that and getting to meet David Mack. Again, great guy, and he's just produced some really incredible stuff, both visually and even his written work here in Daredevil. Really well done stuff. Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, I think this qualifies for a hidden gem Marvel must-read. Next on my list, X Lives, X Deaths of Wolverine by Benjamin Percy. Here I have it presented in an oversized hardcover edition from Marvel Comics. This is a fantastic book, and this was actually the impetus for doing this video. I had a commenter, and I apologize I don't have the comment here. If it was you, let me know in the comments though, but they basically commented on this book recently about how amazing it was. They considered it a top 5 Wolverine story, and it had me reflecting, thinking, yeah, this is actually a really fantastic Wolverine book that I think for a couple different reasons, not as many people got a chance to read it. A lot of people said these collections were overpriced. I certainly agree with that argument. I think for the volume of the book, this was a pretty hefty price point when it came out. I did end up saving up for it and picking it up just because I am a huge fan of Wolverine, and I do love these Krakoa era editions, so I tried to get what I could. Definitely wasn't able to collect all of it. But anyway, this story is essentially a Wolverine story that takes him across different periods in his history and timeline, which frankly is always fertile narrative ground for me as a Wolverine fan. I'm all about these great flashbacks and looks at these different periods in Wolverine's history and memory, especially having such a fractured memory. It's also a very big Moira McTaggart story. I will not do any spoilers right here, but I will say this is after the events of Jonathan Hickman's Inferno, so that really shifted some status quo stuff for Moira McTaggart during this Krakoa era of X-Men based storytelling. So I'd say overall this book feels half Wolverine, half Moira, maybe giving a slight edge to Wolverine, of course, the titular character, but honestly both sides of the storytelling are exceedingly well done. This really is, in my mind, one of the highlights of the entire Krakoa era or age of the X-Men, but it also feels like just a fantastic standalone Wolverine story. I again won't go into spoilers here, but the setup is perfect, spinning out of Inferno, and it really is just a fun exploration of Wolverine's character. I think for me, things you need to read prior to reading this book. Could you read this just starting fresh and not be totally lost? I would say you might need to do a little bit of homework or kind of online Wikipedia, Google research just to understand the foundational setup for the Krakoa era that began with House of X, Powers of 10 by Jonathan Hickman, and reading Inferno by also Jonathan Hickman. That really helps set up this story. Beyond that, knowing basics of different periods in Wolverine's comic book history as well will make the payoff in this book all the more satisfying, but I don't think you have to have any kind of comprehensive knowledge of that to really enjoy this book. But I think for Wolverine fans, this is absolutely a must-read comic, and for me, a real hidden gem with some modern Marvel writing. Please don't miss out on X Lives, X Deaths of Wolverine. And lastly, but not leastly, this is Fantastic Four: The Fate of the Four by Chip Zdarsky. This is presented in another beautiful oversized hardcover edition from Marvel Comics. I will say, while it is labeled a Fantastic Four book, it really is the Marvel 2-in-1 series by Chip Zdarsky. I think for marketing, they just labeled it Fantastic Four, Fate of the Four, but this is his run on Marvel 2-in-1. This story also predominantly follows The Thing and the Human Torch throughout the entirety of the narrative. We do have the other members and different appearances, things like that, but this is primarily a Human Torch Thing storyline. This takes place after the events of the Marvel Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman, so it shifted the status quo for the Fantastic Family in ways that I will not spoil here. But for fans of these characters, this was a very fun exploration of kind of the inner workings of the Fantastic Four, their relationships and their dynamics, particularly with our friend Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm. I love the kind of adventures and misadventures we got to throughout this series. There is kind of a multiversal plot component to this book, I will say. Not really a huge spoiler, that is a big active part of this book, but it's done in a way that is absolutely character driven. While the scenes and maybe universe change throughout the storytelling, I was absolutely grounded with these central characters in a way that really impacted me. There's a surprising amount of just comical levity, but also deep, almost tear-jerking, heart-rending kind of moments. I think that this is a series that absolutely displays Chip Zdarsky's tremendous range as a comic book writer, at least in my opinion. Admittedly, I am a huge Chip Zdarsky fan. I love when he does gritty, kind of dramatic stuff. I like when he does kind of comedic work, and I like when he really plays with my emotions and gives me a little bit of everything, which is what I really felt like I got here with Fantastic Four: The Fate of the Four. The art throughout this book, while it changes a bit, is all pretty fantastic as well. We get some great appearances from notable supporting members of the Fantastic Four greater universe. Some of the villains show up as well, and just some really good character bits. I think also if you're following the modern history of the Fantastic Four, this is an essential chapter and an ingredient to just understanding kind of the just the totality of where the Fantastic Four has been within the last decade or two of Marvel Comics. I do think this is a hidden gem because I don't hear people talk about this much, especially with the popularity of Chip Zdarsky, particularly in his role on Daredevil, and I know he's been on Batman for a while. For whatever reason, this is a Marvel title from him that I don't feel like gets enough credit, and it's absolutely worth the investment, at least in my mind. I had an opportunity to review this book on my channel, so if you want a fuller review, definitely check out that review to get more details, but this is absolutely a hidden gem I think all Fantastic Four fans should check out. Okay, and can you believe it already? We're going to be wrapping up this video. This is 5 Marvel comic must-read hidden gems, and this was an absolute delight to put together. If you would like to see me do this for DC Comics or maybe independent publishers, let me know that in the comments. I could definitely try to work that into my production schedule in some form. And also, I would love the comment section to look like a great recommendation list for your Marvel comic hidden gems. What are books or collections you feel like deserve more credit, deserve more readership from the incredible Marvel Comics? I would love to get some new recommendations. I think there are so many collections out there that are just under the radar for so many, and this is your chance to shout them all out. I personally cannot wait to see some of the recommendations we get, so in advance I'll just say thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the journey with me as always, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone, have a good one.